Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board's Finance and Audit Committee meeting this morning, March the 17th, 2022. Thank you for being with us. If the Secretary will note that Vice Chair Miller and Directors Camacho and Gilmetti are with us, so we've got a full complement of this committee. And with that, we will move into the first item that we have on our each of our meetings, and that is public comment. So if you could lead us through that, Mo, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Today, we are hosting this meeting remotely via Zoom. In a moment, we will begin to take public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please utilize the raise your hand feature, which is typically located at the bottom of your screen, so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide their comment. I will interject at 1 minute and 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our core reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream. Mr. Chairman, first up for public comment, we have a Blair Beekman.
Good morning, Mr. Beekman, and welcome.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thank you for the meeting today. I spoke initially, I've got my mask on, I'm sitting outside. Thanks for your patience, Blair Beekman. I initially spoke, I think about a month ago or so, on the subject of accountability for the future of California high-speed rail. I think if you practice good accountability practices, that sort of clarity can help the process all along the state. I hope we can remember the importance of initial designs of a LA to Sacramento line. That I think if we concentrate on that model, I think options and choices can be much more available to us. I'm a bit worried that in the Tri-Valley area of Dublin and Pleasanton and Tracy, in that area, they're building a new rail line that I question if it's somehow redundant to what can be the future of high-speed rail that can connect into that area. For as much as we like San Jose, I think it's important to concentrate on the LA to Sacramento line, and then from there, things can follow and options can follow for basically all of the Bay Area and not just singularly San Jose. I think the idea is to build options for all of the Bay Area, and I think that can happen easier if you concentrate on a LA to Sacramento model and possibly from a Merced to Tracy to Sacramento model. So good
15
luck.
seconds remaining.
Thank you. So good luck how you can work on this issue, and just a reminder of where I'm coming from and how I'm viewing the issue, and hope it can help in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman, I apologize. Go next.
Mr. Chairman, we have not had any new attendees join. All attendees have heard the instructions and no one else has motioned to offer public comment.
Okay, well, thank you. Then that'll close the public comment for this morning. And we'll move into our agenda. The first agenda item, as usual, is the approval of our committee meeting minutes from last month. Are there any, if there are no changes, if we can have a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
Director Camacho, and was that Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Okay, with a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Item number 2, I just wanted to note, and I think that you have seen it in your packages. Our CFO Annis has provided additional information with regards to change orders that was requested, and he'll be going through that. Those are pages 10 and 11 of his executive summary. And Daniel Horgan has also provided a new schedule with regards to a look forward on metrics on the Central Valley update. So he will be going through that also during his report. With that, we'll move on to item number 3, which is our executive summary by CFO Brian Annis. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Finance and Audit Committee. I'm going to brief off the financial reports executive summary. And our first page of information you're looking at on screen now. At the top, accounts payable, aging, and disputes report. And I wanted to recognize staff because we've hit another milestone here. The authority has not made a penalty payment in 5 years or 60 months. So we've hit the 5-year mark for no late payments. And that's due to a lot of hard work of accounting staff, project managers, etc. So good to get timely payment to our contractors. The next item to report here is that our disputes were about the same month over month at about 96 million, so no significant changes there. Moving to the bottom half of the page, cash management report, we show our cash balances at the end of January. Our Prop 1A bond cash balance was $32 million. We do show a note at the bottom of the page here where we indicate that there was a commercial bond sale in February. This report only goes through January, but we did want to update the board that we have about another 18 million available now due to the treasurers selling some commercial paper. And these bond funds currently are available for our state operations expenditures for state staff and operations on facilities, et cetera, and also importantly for our bookend projects. And the Caltrain electrification project is the primary project right now that's drawing down our Prop 1A funds. Our cap and trade balance ended January at about $1.6 billion. That balance does reflect the August 21 auction proceeds. However, it does not yet include the November 21 proceeds nor the February 22 auction proceeds. The February auction was another good one for the authority. We estimate we'll receive $244 million from that particular auction. This is really the fourth of very high auction results, largely due to the auction settlement price being significantly higher than the reserve price. The settlement price this time was about $29 per allowance, and that was a new high for current vintage allowance sales. So again, that cap and trade auction continues to be very robust. And the next auction will occur in May. Also, lastly, we track as well the Rail Property Management Fund that receives revenues from the ownership of property, typically where we have property that we lease out to tenants. We receive that revenue and we use that to maintain properties we own. Next slide, please. So this is our administrative budget, and there's a couple updates here I wanted to note for the committee. If you look at the first line under fiscal year budget, you'll note last month we reported a fiscal year state operations budget of 91 million. In January, we've updated it to 97.2 million. and that does tie to the January 10th governor's budget proposal. What's primarily the driver there, it's about a 6.1 million increase. And that's primarily driven because the governor included a $3.9 million reimbursement from Caltrans to the authority to work on integrated rail planning in the Central Valley. This is part of our early interim high-speed rail service between Merced and Bakersfield concept to run trains in coordination with the ACE trains and the San Joaquin Amtrak trains. Caltrans does fund and help manage in coordination with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, the Amtrak service. So they are a funder of the Amtrak service, and so they're going to sponsor some of this integration study. So again, that's 3.9 million that the authority will expect to receive in our budget from Caltrans, and the early train operator will do the work of doing the additional rail service planning in the Central Valley. The balance of the change, about 2 million, is due to various salary, benefit, and operating expense adjustments that are generally statewide issues, where the governor adjusts for healthcare, retirement, other types of statewide issues for state employees. In terms of the vacant positions and filled positions, we are running really unchanged month over month. And if you look at the last bullet, I described this as we went 7 steps forward and 7 steps back in terms of filling vacancies, because we did fill 7 vacant positions, but for the month, there were 5 separations from the authority where employees left. And we also filled 7 of the vacancies through internal promotions or transfers. So that ended up being a slower month on net, but again, we do see overall progress year over year. You'll note we are up about 33, I believe. Let me look at that again. More than that, I'm sorry, we're up about 40 positions on net, filled positions. And I'll say the monthly expenditures were about the same. We're running 4.95 million a month in terms of our state ops expenditures. Next slide, please. This slide is some similar information on our state staff, but on this slide, we do add the rail delivery partner contractors that we utilize in terms of, we use the term FTEs, which stands for full-time equivalent positions. And that number has continued to fall over the years as we've implemented our form to function to bring in more state staff that generally are at a lower salary rate and do generate savings for the authority. So the RDP, we do this as a bit of a moving average, but their equivalent of RDP staff was 259 full-time equivalent positions in January compared to 292 state staff positions. Next slide, please. This is our capital outlay budget report. In terms of monthly expenditures in January, they did bump up quite a bit from 90 million in December to 178 million in January. We covered some of the major drivers of the cost increase in last month's flash report, but I'll repeat them again. For CP1, there was a time impact settlement that was briefed, I believe, in the CEO report as well. There was, of that, there was about a $41 million payment that is associated with the January invoice. So that 178 million is higher in part because of that time impact related payment of the 41 million. And the other portions of that total time impact settlement will be paid monthly over time. Lastly, the other big factor resulting in the higher expenditure in January was a large right-of-way purchase in CP23 for the Alpaugh Irrigation District. And so that was about 29 million for that large right-of-way purchase. The other issues to note here, we do show the design build contract expenditures specifically in the bullets, about the third bullet in the middle of the page. And again, the CP1 was significantly higher because of that time impact settlement. And the CP2, you'll note design build amount was 15.3 million. But when right of way is added in the above bullet, CP23 was the 48.5 million. Again, that's the right of way is the difference there. The other issue to mention toward the bottom of the page here is we do show bookend project expenditures of $12.6 million. And this is one area where we've adjusted in the forecast we presented last month, the mid-year forecast. We actually increased our bookend budget from 84 million to 130 million. And Caltrain is really the driver of that. We had budgeted expenditure assumption of 60 million for Caltrain for the year, but they're already up at, I believe it's 72 million of expenditures. So we will administratively adjust this budget up for Caltrain. And once we go through that full process with our business oversight committee, we'll update our full reporting. But in some of the detail pages of this financial report, we do show Caltrain exceeding the fiscal year budget by about 12 million. But again, we will be doing a budget adjustment for that. And our agreement with them is to pay the invoices as they come in. And they do have dedicated Prop 1A bond funds to pay those invoices.
Brian, do we have a cap with Caltrain?
We do, yeah. We're limited to the money allocated by the board, and that's 600 million of Prop 1A and 114 million of cap and trade. And I believe most of the cap and trade has been already expended, and I think we're running around halfway through the Prop 1A funds for Caltrain.
So any cost overruns over and above that, Caltrain has to make up the difference?
That's correct. Yeah, we're not responsible for any cost overruns on the project.
Thank you.
Jim, just a note on that, if I might, under our project management financial agreement with Caltrain, when they run into an issue like an overrun, they owe us what they call I forgot the term, but there's a remedy plan essentially that they owe us for that. So they put that together for their current issues that they're working through, and they've been very clear that they're also looking to some of the state and federal dollars that are now made available to help close that gap. So that's not out of our budget.
Thank you, Brian.
They're not looking at us for the cost overruns.
That's correct.
That's right. That's right.
I believe we can move to the next slide if there's no further questions. This slide is just our running total of project expenditures since 2006. We're about 9.3 billion, and the chart indicates the spread of those dollars. We also report at the bottom our state match to ARA, and as has been previously reported, we've fully met that match requirement. As we move into the next fiscal year, we'll likely update this reporting somewhat to I believe probably add some of our additional federal grants. We do actually have 4 federal grants, 3 in addition to the ARA. We have a small what's called an Environmental Protection Agency brownfield grant of 600,000, the fiscal year 10 grant of 929 million. And then, of course, we recently, last fall, received a RAISE grant from the federal government for the WASCO elements of the CP4 project. And so we'll, since there's not going to be many updates here on this ARA chart going forward, we are working to produce a new table that's more relevant. And we typically update our reporting format when we go into the new fiscal year. So sometime in the summer, we'll come back to you with some fresher information on this. But for now, ARA is the one that's done, and the brownfields, the small one of 600,000, is the only active one at the time. But we're working to finish the essentially the management agreement we'll have with the US DOT on the new RAISE grant, and the FY10 grant will start spending more in the track and systems phase of our project.
Are there any constrictions or other restrictions that we need to know, that the committee should know about on any of those three?
No. Again, I will mention when I say the FY10 grant will start spending more in the track and systems phase. I'll just note, per the federal Railroad Administration agreement, that is intended to be somewhat of the last dollars in. They did front load some of the ARA funds, so they came in earlier in the Central Valley project, and the intent is the FY10 funds will come toward the end of the Central Valley project. But other than that, we're working on the RAISE grant agreements, but those in initial discussions, I think the federal government, because it's a different program and it's actually administered by the Federal Highway Administration, they have some different processes. So those might actually be federal dollars we can spend first for that particular element of the project. That's the Highway 46 related work in Wasco.
Thank you.
Next slide. So this slide reflects our value of contracts. On the second line here, you'll note gone from a value of active contracts from about 8.6 billion to about 8.8 billion. And that's driven by some of the executed change orders that were briefed last month, and we'll touch on a bit more in a slide, a couple slides forward. The small business utilization rate has continued to tick up, in this case going from 23.5 to 23.6 month over month, and quite a substantial year over year increase from 21.5 to 23.6. Next slide, please. So this is our contingency report, and I think the key things on the top table to point out are the balance for each CP. CP1 balance 708 million, CP23 balance 688 million, and CP4 balance 139 million. In the table to the bottom right, we do list the large change orders that were approved in the month of January. And these were also included in the February CEO report in the full board. But again, the largest was the time impact related to TPZP. And as mentioned, about 41 million of that was invoiced in the January invoice as well. The other big ones for change orders were the Golden State North and South change orders, putting that scope into the contract, and those two together totaled the 47 million. Again, that was reported last month in the CEO report. And finally, a contract amendment for the Wong Harris contract, and that was 27 million. And there were various other executed change orders, all individually under 25 million, that totaled 47 million. So it was a big month for getting our design scope into the contracts and getting the contractors started on completing those structures or project elements. And the total contingency used again for the month of January or assigned was 244 million.
Brian,
Yes.
you mentioned the change order for the time impact back on page 5. Is that part of the 122 million? So have we paid out the 81 million, which is the difference between the two already?
No, there were The other part of that change order is most of the remaining amount will be paid monthly. So I believe there's going to be going forward monthly payments of about 3 million a month. And so that's where the remainder will be paid, spread out
So we're
in future
amortizing
monthly
it. We're
invoices.
somewhat amortizing it.
But that is, as Ernie, I just want to clarify also, is that what Ernie asked then? Is the 122 is the total amount of which the previous page, I think, was 41,000 or 41 million or so. So the difference between that and the 122 is the amortized portion of the TIA. Is that correct?
That's right. And there were a few elements of that weren't, I think of the 122 that wasn't classified as time impact strictly, but most of the remainder does go out monthly going forward, again, at about 3 million a month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So our preliminary data from February is shown on this slide. For overall, for our capital invoiced expenditures, we're projecting about 68.7 million. And that's the detail on the top of the top table shows how that's allocated across the CPs. 26.9 CP1, the 20.6 for 2.3, and about 12 million for CP4. No significant updates on the bottom two charts on state positions and the ARA match. The next couple slides are the supplemental slides the chair had mentioned in his opening. Director Camacho had asked for additional information on the contractor submitted change orders. That's often the first step when the design's completed. They'll provide their estimate of what the cost of the additional scope or revised scope will be. One important note is that the change orders submitted should not be considered our budget cost, because we do look at these closely. In some cases, the individual change orders might be found not to have merit, and so we would not pay those. In other cases, as we work through the detail of what the change is, the unit cost, the other elements of cost, we typically do end up executing change orders that are significantly below the contractor proposed level. So for budget purposes, we are informed by what the contractor submitted, but again, we do not set the budget based on that alone. There's a couple of charts to go through, and we do also have here with us today our Director of Risk and Project Controls, Jamie Metalka. And Jamie in his office helped put this information together. So he was going to run through the specifics of the table.
Yeah, thank you, CFO Ennis. Good morning, committee. In response to the last F&A committee meeting, there was a request for a cumulative amount of pending change orders. And since this is a new slide, I'd like to walk through kind of it from the left to the right, and then we'll get to the next slide that provides sort of a little bit of additional analysis. So what we're reflecting here is each construction package, the value of their contingency balance as of the reporting cutoff date, which is part of the reports that we have today. But we're also including what is pending or moving through the governance action process, so you get a more realistic, up-to-date review of where the remaining contingency balance is at. When you take those two together, we are at about $1.2 billion. And then when you add in our program-wide unallocated contingency of $419 million, we're at a total available contingency balance of $1.63 billion to address pending change orders.
Are there any restrictions on the unallocated contingency with regards to how they can or when they can be used?
There is a certain portion of it that is used specifically for construction elements as part of our grant, which is directed towards the Central Valley segment. The rest of it is free to use for any portion of the program as the CEO decides.
Do you know off the top of your head how much of that is allocated for the contingency, Jamie?
Yeah. The interim use balance is about $108 million.
Great, thank you.
Next slide, please.
Okay,
Okay, so now giving sort of the picture in time of where we're at with pending change orders. So we've got a total of about $1.406 billion that contractors have claimed. When we looked back at our overall historical performance, we saw a percentage when averaged out of 63% of what contractors have claimed that we have paid out or settled on. When applying that percentage to what we have as pending change orders, we came up with a number of about $888 million of where we potentially will land. Now, that's important to note that of the 1.406 that's being shown here, that not all merit determinations have been fully analyzed or completed, that some of these could end up being zero and some could end up being slightly above. But when you take the average and you get to a figure that for forecasting, we're at about $888 million based on our experience. When you take that from our total of available contingency, we're looking at about $325 million remaining for the three packages. And then again, when adding in the program-wide unallocated contingency of $419 million, we would have about $750 million in available contingency to handle additional risk that is still in front of the program.
And Mr. Chairman, can I comment here?
yes, please go ahead, Brian.
Just something about the numbers here that I think is relevant. As I've talked to the committee before, I've done two construction updates to the broader board on some of these. Remember that 2-3 has 4 particularly large commercial settlement issues that we're working through that make up a big, fairly sizable percentage of that number. And then on CP1, we've also identified 10 or 11 that are primarily post-contract award design changes and contract changes, mostly encouraged by third-party scope changes that occurred between 2015 and 2018 that we are now finalizing and getting into the design and getting that scope into the contract. So we've identified those both in the 2020 business plan and the 10 or so on CP1 that we've now executed 5 of those 11. So there's about 6 left. I guess there's 11 total. 6 left that to work through getting those in the final scope of the contract. And those are really the big drivers. My view is, and what we're driving the team to do from a management perspective, is get these things driven home so that we can get these unsettled issues settled and behind us. And then our expectation is that large change orders, certainly this magnitude, will be a thing of the past for us. And we can now manage the scope going forward in a much more traditional way of managing the project. Got to get all the scope finalized. And that's the big thing here.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah.
Much of what we have here is much of the problem has been a result of the fact that we were lagging behind on the full design,
Yes.
which were attributed to scope. So, and that's the danger of a design build contract. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, that, and the fact, look, there were a lot of scope changes post contract award, and a lot of those were driven by third parties, and that's we've been pretty clear about that in past business plans. That's our big lesson learned going forward, is why we now are instituting the stage gate process going forward, so that this kind of risk is identified and really put to bed before we're into a construction release contract. And so that's we're finishing up yesterday's issues, and then we go forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
There's no further questions. That completes the financial report.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Any questions for our CFO before we move to the Central Valley update? Hearing none or seeing none, we'll move on then to our agenda item number 4. And Daniel Horgan on our Central Valley update. The floor is yours. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Richards and F&A committee members. Okay, I'm going to work through the January Central Valley status report. I've highlighted areas that I'm going to speak to, so it's easier for you to follow along. So January contractors expenditures total 107.9 million. That was 84.6 million from CP1. CP2 tree was 15.3 million. And the CP4 contract was 8 million. We executed in January a total of 28 change orders, totaling 207.9 million. And the big ones in there were obviously the TIA for CP1, which is 122 million approximately. We had Belmont Avenue as well, which was 28.7 million. And we had a settlement for intrusion protection barrier on CP4. That was 13 million. Okay, as Jamie said, the risk contingency as at the end of January is 1.535 billion. In terms of structures and guideway design completion, we got another package of design completed. That was the cold slew design on CP2 tree. So we have now one package of design left on the CP2 tree contract, and we have two packages of design left on CP1. The plan is to complete all designs by Q2, and we're on target to do that. In terms of third-party design approvals, we had an increase of one design approval in the month of January. Next slide, please. Okay, construction workers. We had an increase of 36 construction workers from December to January. So as of January, we're at 802 construction workers. We do anticipate this figure to continue to climb throughout the year. And later I will give you an update on the preliminary figures for February. In terms of construction structures, we got 66 structures in construction or underway out of a total of 93. In terms of guideway, we have 87 miles of guideway in construction or complete out of 119. That was an increase of 1 mile of guideway getting into construction in the month of January. In terms of utilities, we completed 7 more utility relocations in the month of January. Our plan for the rest of the year is to do a significantly greater number per month. And you will see in the preliminary February figures that we have moved up significantly. Okay, in terms of right-of-way, again, the right-of-way department transferred 8 parcels of land to the design build contractors. This is slightly lower than we've been producing in the last 6-7 months. And we anticipate for the rest of the year that it will be slightly lower. We've actually achieved 90% of all right-of-way parcels now, and we anticipate throughout the rest of the year probably between 8 and 20 parcels per month. Next slide, please.
Hey, Daniel, can I go back to utility relocations for a second?
Of course.
You share that we have 564, or 31% not started. Do we have some sort of a schedule as to, when those are going to get started or when they're going to get completed?
Yes, we do have a detailed schedule for all utilities, and we're tracking, for example, on the CP1 contract, we have a target of doing 235 utilities this year. And on the CP2 tree contract, we have a target of doing 180. So we have a plan for each and every utility.
Can you kind of give us an executive summary as to when some of these are getting started and when they're going to get completed? I'm concerned that, obviously we're not going to meet the timeline of what the contractors want us to do.
So the plan for this year, 2022, is, as I said, 235 for CP1, approximately 170 for CP2 tree, and approximately 30 for CP4. Next year, we have a similar number planned for execution.
So my concern is, how does that blend with the contractor schedule?
That is written into the contractor schedule, and that is it's already planned, and it's we don't anticipate any delays from utilities at this point in time, Jim.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, in terms of environmental clearance, it's progressing well. As most of you will be fully aware, the San Jose to Merced environmental approval will be coming to the board for approval next month.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment here?
Yes, please go ahead, Brian Kelly.
I just want to be very clear in terms of setting expectation because of the questions that Jim just asked, and I think it's important. You know, our best contract in terms of where we are in terms of scope behind us, definition of the work that's left in front of us is CP4. We're driving that home in terms of getting that work done. We expect it to be done within a year. But I do want to comment on this. The biggest risk on that is a third-party risk. We have a contract, a third party we're working with down there, utility district. We are affecting their equipment in a lot of places, and we have to work through design approvals and relocation of some of their equipment. And that is the biggest single risk to our schedule. So I just want to be clear, as I heard Daniel say, but I want to be super clear on this because that is our single highest risk issue on our schedule in 4. If you talk about CP1, the reality on CP1 is we're going through the urban part of Fresno. That's where the bulk of the utility relocations are. And while we have these things scheduled and underway, it still requires third-party review of design and approvals and great cooperation with entities like PG&E, the freight railroad partners, and we have set up and established dedicated third-party review teams to make sure that we are executing this as efficiently as we can. But I just want to underscore the fact that in my view, both for 4 and for CP1, the biggest single risk to our schedule is the third-party interactions relative to utility relocations. And so we will brief this board every month, this committee every month on where we are, what our plan is. We have established a plan for goals for this year and next. But I just want to emphasize that it is the process of working through that this late in the game that is the biggest single risk to the schedule. And that I just want everybody really clear on that. And we have identified leads to work with each third party, and we have a targeted effort to make sure we're not seeing these things slip. But this is the biggest area of risk on our schedule.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Daniel.
Next slide, please. Okay, so this shows the contractors' combined expenditure over the last 6-7 months. So you can see January was 108 million, as Brian Ennis already said, and there was a significant proportion of that was on the CP1 contract, and 41.2 million was as part of the TIA settlement. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the contingency drawdown. As Jamie said earlier, we're anticipating by April, the contingency drawdown will be at 1.327 billion. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the third-party approvals. We secured an additional 1 third-party approval in the month of January. There are still 131 third-party design approvals to be obtained. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the construction labor. In January, we had an uptick. We're at 802. In February, we'll come to that figure later. We've also increased, and we expect this figure to continue to increase throughout the year. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the miles of guideway in construction, which is we had an increase of 1 mile of guideway up to 87 out of 119 structures. We've completed 66, so we're in construction, and we are anticipating adding more structures in the coming months. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the right of way. In the month of January, there were 8 parcels handed over to the design build contractors, and we have made very good progress in the past 6 months. And when we come to so now we have achieved over 90% of all right-of-way parcels delivered, which is a big milestone. And this is approximately 6 months ahead of schedule. Next slide, please.
Daniel, can you go back to that for 1 second? I'm sorry. Again, I want to update the board on another issue here. Just so that folks are clear, you see we had a very good, strong end to 21. As we come into 22, there's some parcels under the natural swing of the right-of-way process. There's a little bit of a lull, but February was also a good month. I don't want to get too far ahead of next month's reporting, but we had about 20 in February. They'll be a little bit slower for a couple months after that, and then tick up again as the year goes on. So we'll see a little bit of a low coming in, but then it'll tick back up as we get into summer months, August. Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. Okay, this shows the handover of the railroad parcels. There was no railroad parcels due in January. Railroad parcels have been handed over as and when we require. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the land conveyance packages. There are 960 land conveyance packages required prior to utility relocations. Of those, 635 have been completed. There are 325 to go. Of that number, there are approximately 200 that are at 80–90% complete, just waiting for the land acquisition. In the month of January, there were 9 land conveyance packages completed. Next slide, please. Okay, earned value, CP4. So good news here is that we are above the yellow line and we're below the dotted red line. So that means we're tracking to completion by the 1st of March 2023. The actual earned value was 80%. The plan was 81%. So scheduled performance index 0.98, which is well within the tolerances. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of the cost trend, our forecast cost as of the end of January was going to be 530 million. The actual was 526 million. So we're still tracking here to an outturn cost for the end of the project of 679 million. We've also added an additional date here. Contract construction completion, substantial completion is the 1st of March, but the final completion of the contract is the 3rd of May. That is to allow time for documentation and rectification of any outstanding issues. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the flash report. So these are the preliminary figures for February. So the first one is the preliminary labor count is up by 13%. It's at 906 in February, which is a good increase, very positive. And as Brian said earlier, we have 20 right-of-way parcels delivered to the design build contractors. So again, that's a very good figure. In terms of change orders executed, we have 70 million in change orders executed in February. And the final one are utilities, which obviously I know Jim is very monitoring very closely. We have managed to complete 8 utilities in the month of February. So this is going to be something that we're going to focus heavily on in the coming months. Okay, that concludes the Central Valley status report. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Do any of the members have any questions for Daniel? All right, hearing none. Daniel, thanks for putting together this final schedule. It's helpful for us.
Thanks.
With that, then, unless any committee members have any comments that you'd like to make right now. And hearing none, that does complete the agenda for our Finance and Audit Committee for March the 17th. For those of you watching from across California, thank you very much. And we encourage you to join us at 11 a.m. this morning for the March board meeting for the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.